Now, let's start with some announcements. And if Diane was here, and she'll probably be here in a few minutes, we would have her give the announcements, but let's think of some things that we should know. The First Presidency announced this week that they are asking all temple patrons to wear masks. Since the temple opened, it has been all workers to wear masks, but now they're asking for all patrons to wear masks. And so we should know that. That made us then wonder, does that mean that maybe we should require masks in the Family History Center? And as we discussed it, we thought, yes. And so this is not politically decided or anything. It's that if our prophet thought it was important, and he's a medical man after all, to wear them at the temple, to keep the temples open, we certainly would want to also keep the Family History Center open. And so we have masks in the Family History Center, and we will ask people that come in, if they don't bring their own, to wear one of those.
May I ask?
Yes.
Does anyone know, are there any particular requirements about our masks in the temple? Are they supposed to be white? Are they supposed to be?
They would prefer that they don't have logos on them.
Okay, so that's like only.
Most people wear white or black. I think I've read something that in addition to logos, if it doesn't have big patterns, it's better. But I have seen workers wearing plaid ones. So, but I would think, you know, kind of try to tone it down. So, and also today, the counselor in our bishopric who was conducting said that he was surprised at how easy it was for him to get an appointment. He thought that since he hadn't gotten any appointments in advance when they were first made available, that he wouldn't be able to get any, but that by going on in the evening or first thing in the morning, he has been very pleased that he's been able to get appointments. I think that we kind of have to be more flexible than we ever were before about that. Helen, you will need to help me with this one. In October, on about the third week, we had planned a dual Saturday class set. And one of the ones we were going to do Native American, and we were going to do Spanish speaking. And because of, I forget why, but Diane, why is it, Helen?
Because the spread of the variant of COVID-19 is increasing. The number of cases are increasing. So we thought it'd be safe to cancel it in order to be safe.
It's pretty hard to socially distance if we have you all sitting in front of the speaker. Yeah, so we're going to postpone that till November. Those are the announcements that I'm thinking of. If any of you think of something, jump in quickly and say so. We have been very pleased that we have been open at the Family History Center. We've appreciated all of our workers that are going.
What is the telephone number at the Family History Center?
We don't have a phone number anymore.
Oh, okay. So we just go online someplace to find out when it's open and so forth.
There should be a page on our Facebook page. There should be a piece of paper that tells our schedule of when we're open and who are the workers. And so the name of our Facebook page is Provo South and Freedom Family History Center. And you'll know you've got the right page because there's a little heart made out of flowers at the top. And there's also the instructions on there on a page and a screen thing, you know, to show the routine that you use to get an appointment at the temple. So basically, what are our hours? Monday from 10 till 1. Does that sound right to you, Elsie? I see your mouth moving, but I don't hear you, but I still don't hear you. Your volume's probably low on your speaker or something, on your microphone. Now you're closed. Now we shouldn't hear you.
Okay.
I think something on your computer is turned way low, Elsie. So I'm going to tell you what I think it is, and you tell me if I'm right. From 10 to 12, the Hutchisons, and from 12 to 2, you and Augustina. Does that sound right to you? Yes? Okay. Tuesday in the evening, it's Pam Moe and Nina Orchard. Wednesday evening, it's Trevor, and I saw Trevor a minute ago, but I don't see him now. It's Trevor and Richard, and then Thursday, I think we're closed. Friday evening, it's John Baird and Keith Buxton. And Sunday, or maybe Wednesday, or maybe Thursday is Brother and Sister Tapia, but I know that Brother and Sister Tapia are Sunday night as well. And they will help people in English, but their expertise, of course, is Spanish. And they speak easier in their native tongue of Spanish.
I think the group comes in on Thursday.
You think who comes in on Thursday?
Brother and Sister Tapia have a little group that comes in on Thursday.
They are following the plan of meeting with one person at a time and saying, what can we do to help you? And they are certainly, I think that our Spanish speaking wards are among the highest producing, and more people are involved in their wards than the average other ward. So we have to be very proud of them for what they are doing.
And what are the hours when they are open? On the ones that are open, days they're open?
For Spanish?
No, all of the evening hours at the center.
7 to 9.
Okay, thanks.
At the door of, now, like I said, I think it's on one of the screens on our Facebook page. It also, there are pieces of paper with the little notes on it outside the door. So you can go by the door. So does everybody know where the Family History Center is?
No.
The Family History Center is on the east end of the Freedom Steak Building, which is on the corner of 5th West and 10th South. My husband says it's 9th South, and he's probably right.
Yeah, it's 835 South.
That's the address, 835 South, 900.
500 West.
500 West, okay. Tonight, we want to talk about land records. Now, in the weeks up to this, we have talked about just about from the beginning of a researcher's work to now we're on a little bit more advanced stuff. So we've already talked about how to use Family Search and how to use Ancestry and how to search on Family Search and Ancestry and how to put memories on Family Search and how to put sources in Family Search and Ancestry and move them back and forth between the two sites, and how to do descendancy research, which is where when you choose an ancestor and make sure that all of their descendants have had their work done. So those are some of the topics that we have discussed in the last few weeks. Tonight, we're going to talk about a less used topic, and that is land records. Now, the church has we also had a week on censuses. The church has had indexing projects in the United States to index the records that are used with the most genealogy success, the ones that have the most genealogical information in them. So censuses were indexed early. Vital records when they have been available, because each state has different laws about privacy rules of birth, marriage, and death records. So when those have been available, they have been indexed. And marriage records continue to be added as different states' rules and time periods change. Land records is one of the major sources for genealogy information, and they don't have as much information. But they fill in a lot of information about what our ancestors were like and what they did. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And when somebody buys or sells land, it tells who they are and where they're buying the land. So you know who a person is and where they're at. Often they list their spouse, not so much other people in their family, but if they're selling to other people in their family, then they're going to list that. Something that is sometimes used, and when it's used, it's a real wonderful thing, is people will tell when the last time they live in a place and they're selling their land, they often tell where they're going. And the first time somebody lives in a place, they often tell where they came from. And that particular trait really helped me out once. Something else that helps is you can tell who their neighbors are, or if anyone with certain last names lives in a nearby place. You can also trace a family as they migrate across the country by checking and finding them in deeds. I one time found a deed in Muhlenberg County, Kentucky for John Michael, but my family has a lot of John Michaels, so I wasn't sure which John Michael it was. But as I looked at the land records, I found that Hugh Michael, John's son, also bought land, even though he was just a teenager. So that helped me know that this was in fact the right John, and that their family had stopped over for a few years in Muhlenberg County as they continued their move west. When I traced the land records, and thereby the census records and the marriage records and the other records of my Michael family, they migrated from Germany to Philadelphia. Then they went from Philadelphia to North Carolina, and from North Carolina into Kentucky, and from Kentucky to Illinois, and from Illinois to Missouri, and from Missouri into Kansas, and from Kansas into Colorado. And so I have been able to follow that path that they lived by just checking and making sure that they had land records in those places. Diane says, oh, she also had relatives in Muhlenberg, Kentucky. Wonder if they knew each other. We could find out if they knew each other by looking in the censuses and also looking in land records. Now, census records before 1850 only tell the name of the head of the household and how many people in each age group lived with him. So I can say, well, I think that this is my John, but is he married to Sally, or is this the John that's married to somebody else? And so I cannot use census records for that, but I can check the land record, and then the land record, they nearly always list their wife. So I can check and make sure I've got the right family there. Something we should remember about our country is in the early days of our country, like Revolutionary War times and War of 1812 times, our country was land rich and dollar poor. They claimed that they owned the land further east than the Appalachian Mountains, further west than the Appalachian Mountains. But they didn't have very many dollars to pay the soldiers that had fought in the Revolutionary War and that had fought in the War of 1812, some of which they wanted to pay, some of which they wanted to give pensions to. And they just didn't really have the money. But they could say, oh, but you can have land in Ohio. And then they did not feel so bad about not being able to help their veterans, because the veterans could figure out how to turn that land into something profitable for them. Sometimes the way they turned it into something profitable was by selling it sight unseen. And so they would sort of sell their that was called bounty land. They would sell their bounty land to an agent who would then have land that they had in further west that they could then sell. And sometimes they just went where their land was and made it profitable. So at different times, the federal government opened different states for land purchase. And so I'm going to share my screen and show you how it affected my Michael family, okay? As they wanted to move from Ohio west into from Illinois west into they wanted to move west into Missouri. So they followed, this is what they did. They went to a land office, and the government had land offices, but they weren't very close together, but scattered throughout the Western United States. And when they opened a new land for settlers, then they established a land office. And for $1.25 an acre, American citizens could buy land. And so here is how it went for the Michaels when they wanted to go to Missouri. And they kind of had already gotten there, but they didn't always exactly have land. So their last name was Michael, spelled M-I-K-E-L. Okay, so I've got the location. I'm searching documents. Oh, so who kept track of these land records? I'm not sure exactly who kept track of them at which point in time, but today the U.S. Department of the Interior keeps track of those records, and they have made a wonderful website. Now, only like 15 or 20 years ago, if you wanted to look for the land, it was much more difficult. But now you can go to this web page, and it's the U.S. Department of the Interior, but the name of the website is GLO. That stands for Government Land Office Records. .BLM, because the Bureau of Land Management is who manages them for the Bureau of the Interior, .gov government. And so the way that I found that is I looked up government land records. And here it is, Government Land Office Records, Bureau of Land Records. Except that looks like maybe it's Jamaica, and of course we don't want Jamaica.
Land.
Okay, Government Land Records. And there's also some other government land records websites, but I'm going to make sure I choose the one that says GLO Records. And then that's going to take me to this site that I already showed you. My husband says it's General Land Office Records. Okay, so I want to search for a land patent. Now, what are the words that talk about land? One of the words is patents. One of the words is deeds. One of the words is mortgages. When we're talking about deeds or some of those other land records, if you're buying land, you are a grantee. If you are selling land, you are a grantor. So you're granting it to someone else. Also, sometimes we're going to want to know the instrument date is the date that it was recorded by whoever was recording it. Sometimes it's the county that kept track of the land. Sometimes it was, as in this case, the federal government. So I want the government sells land in patents. So I click on the word patent, And now on the location, oh, I'm gonna have to go back to where I had Missouri at. And I could check for just you, Michael, who was my ancestor of initial research, or I can just check for all of the Michaels. Why don't I do that? I'm just going to check for all of the Michaels who got land from the government in Missouri. And here is the list, and it is a page and a half long. And as I go through these names, I recognize all but just a couple of them. And see, here are a whole lot of Hugh Michaels. Now, when I noticed Hugh Michaels, I figured out that he came to Adair County, Missouri in 1838. Well, he came to Missouri in 1838. But these are all listed 1852. That isn't very close to when I thought he got there. So I'm going to go down through this list. And I'm going to move my line and try to get it out of the way and see if I find any dates at an earlier time than that. Here is one of John Michael, and John is Hugh's father. And he got land in 1841 and in 1843. Now, if I look at the counties that they got this land in, it's mostly in Schuyler County and Adair County. But here are two in Macon County. And when I study my history a little bit, I discover that Macon County was there earlier, and then they split it in half to get Adair County, and then they split it again to get Schuyler County. And so Macon County would have been where they would have gone when they very first got to Missouri. So if I go look at that land, and I want to look at, here it tells me the details. The details are that he got 40 acres, and it gives us a serial number, and it says that the land office that he had to go to buy this was in Fayette, and then this is the law of the federal government, which allowed him to buy the land, and that's interesting, but mostly what I want to see is what did his deed look like? What did the patent that they gave him when they bought this land look like? And I just think they're fun. Not dramatic in extreme amounts of information, and especially not in land patents, because mostly they didn't bother to list their wives. Mostly it was just the men that went to the land records and took care of it. But so here we have John Michael of Macon County, Missouri, and he went to the General Land Office and at Fayette, and then it says that there was an act of Congress on the 24th of April, 1820, that enabled him to buy this land. And now here is the complicated description of the land. And if ever I want to look at a map and see exactly where his land was, I am going to want to write all this down. And some of the key words that are going to help me figure this out on the map, because the map has to have an address sufficient for people to be able to look at the map and figure it out. Nowadays, the address we tend to use is the GPS address. But here, they divided the land into townships and into ranges and into sections. And then they would divide the section into quarters. And then sometimes they would divide the quarters into quarters. So John bought his land in the northwest quarter of section 36 in township 58 of range 16 in the district of lands subject to sale at Fayette, Missouri, and he bought 40 acres. So I can take that address, and when I get better at finding maps online, I can find them there, or I can go to the BYU map office and find the maps, and those maps at BYU are going to be like 36 inches square, and I will be able to look, and I have before bought one of those maps and colored in each of the different relatives where their land was, so that I could kind of see what their relationship with each other was. Now, that was not the information needed for temple work, but it was information needed to help me know more about my family. Now we come down to what is one of the more fun parts of this deed. It again tells his name, and it says that he's being given this by purchase from the government, and that it's going to be his and his heirs forever. And it is going to be signed. And sometimes, instead of being signed by the date, it is signed by how long our country has been a country. And in this case, it stated both the 10th day of November, 1841, and also of the independence of the United States, the 66th year. So that shows how important the birth of our nation was for land. Now, who is signing this deed? John Taylor, President of the United States.
Oh.
And I always think that's fun to see who was President of the United States when my ancestors were buying lands. Now, I can print a copy of this, or I can download a copy to my research files from this place, or I can get a certified copy and pay for it, and it's a few dollars. For most things, I'm thoroughly satisfied with this copy that I print out. Now, this tells me then the address of John buying land. It does not tell me his wife's name, but it does prove that he went to Missouri to buy land as early as 1841. And as I look through all of the rest of these, I see Hugh was buying land in 52 and 56 and 57, and the different other children of John Michael are buying land at different times. Now, this made it possible for them to leave the crowded East and move west, because our government did this and made this land available. And my husband asked, is this the county? Yes. And this is the section number. And then these are the townships and the ranges that you need to find them on the map. Now, if I go to my other tab, we can look up Colorado for Claude Everett. And this is my grandfather. And so I can search the patent for my grandfather. In this case, I gave his name, and I get his specific land. Now, he bought his land after 1862. So because of the Act of Congress in 1862, the land was free. You did not have to pay for it if you worked hard for 7 years to improve the land and make it more profitable. Now, my grandpa Everett went from Pueblo with his young family down to Mancos, Colorado, and he was on the south end of town. My grandpa Wilden was on the west end of town. I kind of grew up thinking of them as the Mormon end of town and the non-Mormon end of town. So my mother's father and my mother grew up on the Mormon end of town, and my dad and his family grew up on the non-Mormon end of town. But here it goes through and it gives the same description of the land. And by now it's Woodrow Wilson in 1915 that finished the deed for him. But also what was very interesting to me was go to related documents. And when I went to related documents, I was able to find all of the 7 years that he was proving to the government that he was taking care of this land and improving it. And he tells about what property he built, or what buildings he built, and what crops he planted, and what his yield was on that crops, and affidavits from his neighbors saying that they knew him and he really, in fact, had been there. And I enjoyed showing these to my dad and talking with him about his dad's homestead in Mancos. And as we read the crops that my grandpa had grown, my dad said, well, my gosh, if that's the only crops I could get, I would just plow it under and quit. So it shows that they did in fact have to work and earn this land. And now I have several uncles and cousins that own land. The same homestead is now lived on by my cousin and his son. So this was a way that we can find out about our family and when they bought land from the government. And I think this is fun. Yes, Jeannie.
Did the president sign the deed or?
Well, sometimes I think so, and sometimes I look closer and it says by the president with his signature, and then it says by, and it has somebody else's, the secretary. And I look and try to see if those two signatures look the same, and sometimes they do look the same.
But did it happen after the 7 years of work were completed? Is that when?
After the 7 years.
Okay.
But like I said, that file tells about all the times in between, when they first went to the land office and then when they were finally able to get it all. So if this is like 29 or 39 states have land that came into people's ownership by these acts of Congress. So if you have family in the West, you should look it up and just see what your family looks like. Now, what do I do next to find out about their land records after they got their land from the government? And for this, I'm going to give you a little bit of a reminder of what it was like in the days before computers and indexed records. Because when we look at other land records, we have to go back and pretty much do it the same way. If I were to go to a county courthouse and ask to look at the records, they would take me into a big room that had black books, and I would have to sort through the black books and figure out which books I needed and which pages I needed. And because the church has microfilmed nearly all of the land records in the United States, we can do that now on Family Search, but we can't do it indexed. We have to do it straight from the regular records. So if I am going to go look for Hugh Michael and land in Adair County, I am going to have to go to search records, search card catalog, and I go and I get this screen, which is a computer index of the card catalog. It used to be that when you went to the genealogy library in Salt Lake, all of these things were on 3x5 cards, but this part at least is on computer nowadays. So I am going to say that I want to look for Adair County. And so when I put in Adair County, Missouri pops up. So I can click on that. And then I do search. And this is a list of the card catalog for Adair County. So it tells me that if my ancestors in Adair County, I can look, there are 7 different microfilms about biographies of people that lived in Adair County. There are 5 that are indexes of biographies. There are 5 of microfilm rolls of cemeteries in Adair County, some censuses, some church records, some court records, some genealogies, directories, histories, and here is land and property records. Then it goes on to military, obituaries, probates, and other topics. Now, maps would be interesting to look at, but I don't want to look at the maps until I know what on the map I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and look at land and property. And when I look at land and property, it gives me these 3 entries. Well, the entry that I want is deeds. So I'm going to click on deeds. And all of this different clicking that I'm doing is very similar to putting a roll of microfilm in the microfilm reader and turning the handle. So it's going to tell me that there's 25 microfilm rolls of deeds. Okay, and so I am going to come on down here, and I'm going to want to start with the index. And the county land record started in 1841, and this roll has the index of 1840 to 1870. So I am going to come over here and I'm going to click on the picture of the camera. And that is going to be the same as loading a roll of microfilm in the microfilm reader. And if I click on this one, it's going to tell me what is in this volume. It's volume 0, and it's years 1841 to 1870. And it tells me when they filmed it. That was on sheet 4 of the roll. If I come over here to where there's all these little squares, that's where I get a square showing each picture that's on this roll of microfilm. Now, it starts out as an index, and if I click on the very first one, it is going to start out with all of the names of people who sold land whose name starts with the letter A. And so I can go back to the main screen and go down a ways and choose a different page and see what it shows. Now, previously, I have discovered that page 77 is where I find Hugh Michael. So if that's page 77 there, I'm going to go down. Well, let me just type in 77 and see if that'll do it. 77. Now let's see if one of them has a slide on it. They don't seem to. So, which one is this one? 57. So I still have about 20 more pages to go.
After you enter the 77 in, you have to hit enter.
Oh, I do. Okay, well then let's try that again. As I was preparing and finding the classes for the lesson, I just went sort of a few pages at a time till I found it. Okay. And you see, today I didn't know it was on page 77, but because I had a piece of paper and I could write it down, I wrote down that it's on page 77. So here is the abstract and index of deeds, and it's alphabetical. And so here they are. And if I go down on this page, I find Hugh Michael as the grantor. That means that he's the person that's selling land. And he's selling it to John Ripley. He is selling it on August 17th, 1855, but nobody got around to writing it down until the 16th of September. Now, if I come over to here, it is going to give me that description of where that land was. But this place also tells me that part of it is in town. And so I can look up a map of in town and find out, by using these numbers, I can find out which block in Kirksville, Missouri is where he bought his land. Now, I also, though, by reading this, I can see that in Book E, page 774 is where the deed is. So now I'm going to go back to the list that's from the card catalog, and I'm going to say that I want Book D. So I'm going to go over to find the camera of Book D. And now here are all the pages of Book D. And I have discovered that the deed on the page 774 of Book E is the image of 818. So using this, I can go straight to that page, and here is the deed. And with a little bit of word deciphering, I can read the deed of where Hugh Michael sold land to John Ripley. Now, I would want to look, if I hadn't already found him in all the censuses, to know that he lived much longer than the date on this deed, then I would want to pay particular attention to see if he told where he moved to. But he didn't move any place. He just sold part of his land. And it's going to take me some careful reading. And the more deeds I read, the easier it's going to be, because they talk in legal language. And so you kind of have to figure out how to follow it through. So it says this indenture was made the 17th of August between Hugh Michael and Charity, his wife, Charity. So I know that he and Charity are still married in 1855. Now, but it does say that John Ripley is moving here from Mullane County in the state of Illinois. So if I was looking up this to try to find John Ripley's deed, I would now know for sure where he came from. And then I could go back and look. It looks like Hugh's selling his land for $1,000. And it goes on, and the rest of the deed is legal descriptions and land descriptions that tell me exactly which land he's selling. So I could look on the BLM land records and see if this description is the same as what he bought from the government only a few years earlier. But I can look down here. Now in this case, it's not going to show me, it's going to show me Hugh Michael's signature, but it's going to say that Charity just put a mark. Now, if she just put a mark, that might be a hint that she did not know how to read and how to write. But they both, the clerk, as he processed this, wanted to make sure it was a legal signature. So he did some kind of a seal after their names. And so that is a deed that I can use to trace Hugh and Charity as they lived and moved. So this confirms to me that they lived in Adair County. Now, this particular deed did not give us any new and exciting information, but I have found a couple that were exciting. One time, Charles and I went to a county near Independence, Kansas. And as so often happens with us when we're researching and going to original courthouses, we tend to get to some of the most important places right before they close. And so when we got there, we said to the clerk, we want to look at your oldest deed, because we thought, by chasing history, and when we thought the Hugos moved there, we thought that this would have been the first time they moved to the county, and it would have been in their oldest deeds when the county was the oldest. So they said, oh, okay. And they took us to a closet where there were a few old books, and we looked and found nothing, and we were very discouraged. And so we opened up the closet door and we got ready to leave. And the lady said, now we know more about the land records in our office than you do. So tell us who you're looking for, and maybe we could find them.
Oh.
So we said, well, we're looking for James Henry Hugo and his father Samuel. And they would have been here pretty early. They left Oregon and came to Missouri pretty early. And so we gave them the dates, and they went to Missouri, then they went to Kansas. So she goes and starts to look it up. Then the other lady that was working in the office said, oh, are there any other family names that maybe you'd be interested in? And I said, oh, yes, look for Michael, M-I-K-E-L. I'm particularly interested in Samuel. And so she said, okay. So they both were gone about 2 minutes, and they both brought back the heavy land records. And the first lady had found the homestead papers from when James Henry Hugo had first bought land from the BLM, and when his son, James Henry Hugo, had bought land. And so that proved to us that they had in fact been in Independence, Kansas before they moved to Oklahoma, and it gave us that information. So it was confirming what we had hoped. Nothing extraordinarily new. Then the other lady comes over and she says, well, is this the right Samuel Michael? And she showed me the the homestead papers of Samuel Hugo, who was one of, I didn't know if it was Hugh's brother or Hugh's son, but I knew there was a Samuel that had moved to Kansas. And you might have heard me tell about him when we talked about cemeteries in Kansas and in Oklahoma. But anyway, yes, I think that is the right Samuel. And it said Samuel Hugo, or Samuel Michael, recently removed from Macon County, Missouri. And most of my looking for Samuel Michael, I had looked in Adair County and Schuyler County. I had forgotten to look in the parent county of Macon. And it also listed his wife's name. So now I had the information to go back to that county in Missouri and look for their marriage record and their other land records. So we were taking this trip on our way to a building inspectors conference that Charles had to go to in St. Louis. So as soon as we could possibly get away on Friday afternoon, we left St. Louis and drove to Macon County. And guess when we got there? 20 minutes before they closed. And so the lady said, yeah, I'll let you look at the records. We have them on microfilm. Yeah, we do have those marriage records, but I cannot be late today. I have an appointment. I have to leave on time. I cannot be late. And she got out the microfilm, and by then 5 minutes is already over before we had a chance to look. And she reminded me, I have to leave on time today. I cannot be late. And I just was so discouraged because here I have the record in my hand and I can't read it because I don't have enough time. And so I was just sort of standing there thinking, and she again said, I have to be on time today. I'm sorry, I can't leave late. And I said, I'm trying to figure out how I can get what I want out of this record and you can leave on time. I wonder if I gave you money, you could look it up and print it and send it to me. And she said, no, I couldn't do that because I don't know how much the postage would cost. And I said, how about if I give you $10, you look it up for me, you send it to me, and you spend the rest on candy for the ladies in the office. And she said, oh, yeah, we could do that. So we gave her our address, we gave her the $10, and we left, and then she could leave on time. When she got back to the office the next week, she looked it up, but she looked up things that she knew that were there that I didn't know were there. And she sent me a real gold mine of information. So that is a story about how land records helped me in my research. Going from where I hope they were, where they might be, and going backwards then to where they had come from. Another one of my ancestors was William S. Michael, and he lived in Warrensburg, Missouri before and after the Civil War. And he must have been an interesting man, judging by his land records. His land records show when he bought land and what he bought. And at one time, he bought a vineyard and the necessary equipment for making wine. Another time, he bought and got a deed for it. He sold and got a deed for it and put it in the deed book in the county. He sold a piano. And I guess he wanted to make sure that it was recorded that the man that he sold the piano to actually owed him the money, so that he had proof that this was a legal transaction. And that was interesting to me. So information. Yes.
Nancy, could I make a comment?
You bet.
Jill and I just went through an extensive land record thing. And one thing that might be confusing is if you scroll to the top of that, it'll give the page number. I think it was a high 70. Your image 818, this page you have up on your screen.
Yes.
At the top, what's the number? What's the page number on that?
The page number is 774.
Yeah, so what I found out was, because that was confusing, because in the index, it'll give the page where it's located. and it's not the same as the image number. So what we figured out was they start numbering the pages at the beginning of the record. And there's all these introductory pages. So when you get to page 1, that might be image 32. And so that's the offset. Like 32 is your number. And, I'm just using a random number.
Yes, but you're absolutely correct.
But so we would find the records on say if it said page like 771 and it was, what was it, 8, I don't know what it was, 818 or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, that difference is the difference that you have to add or subtract, in your introduction. When you're looking up, say you're looking up somebody in the ends, and it says this is records on page 850. Well, it might be might have to subtract 32 off that 850, and it's actually going to be in what's that, 28 or something. Anyway.
Yes. This first image is the roll of microfilm number, and then here's all of the instructions about what they're microfilming, and then here is the spine of the book, and then here's the introductory page, and then here's the first page of the index. And so all of those pages are not consistent.
They're images, but they don't give them a page number.
Right.
So your page numbers, there is a difference between the image number and the page number where it's located, or the actual page number is on a different image page. That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely. That is very important to know. And in the olden days, what we did is we scrolled through the microfilm, stopping every few turns to see if we were to that page yet. And you're being more scientific about it and saying, okay, it took seven introductory pages. So if I need such and such, I'm going to add 7 to that to get the image number that I need. And that would definitely be the scientific way to do it. The non-scientific way to do it would be to click on a page, open it up, see what page it is, 63. Okay, I still have a long ways to go. So when I did it this afternoon, I wasted a lot of time by not being scientific, but by instead going down. And what they call this on Family Search is they call it browsing. But it's when you can't go exactly. When I was at the BLM, I clicked on it and it went exactly to that page. But here it is not going exactly to that page. Now I think
we were just confused at first, but it really wasn't that complicated. It's just that some of those first images aren't given a page number, and that's why we kept looking up numbers, and we'd go there and we wouldn't find it. And I guess we hadn't been used to browsing. It's like, well, we browsed around until they figured it out. So.
And yes.
But anyway, I just want to comment.
Now, were you in the courthouse or were you on microfilm?
We were doing it online, like you're doing right here. We were on the same, the records. We were on land records on Family Search.
And this might be really important if this was your ghost town that you were looking up.
Yeah.
Because it can show you, yes, in fact, they did live here, even if this isn't a town any longer. This is, in fact, where they lived.
Yeah.
So tonight's lesson is not what you're going to do in your initial research, but it is something that there will be times when you either want to or need to go to these records.
Could I say something more, Nancy?
Sure.
When you say it not being primary records, but all our primary records claim that my grandfather was born in Cripple Creek, Colorado, and because of land records, we found out that wasn't the case, that it was over in Irwin. And so it just changed everything, all our family records that we had. And then we put birth dates together, and it just showed that everything was wrong. And so it can correct things that we think we have vital records to. But anyway, so
that was very important for you.
Yeah, it was. The land records was a major thing that solved a bunch of unknowns.
Good, good. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
How about if you're trying to find farm property?
What kind of property?
Farm property?
Well, farm property would be land, and they would either own it or rent it. And so this has to be owned land. They would have to have owned the farm.
Okay.
Now, how would you know if they owned the farm or rented it? If you could find them in the census, in most of the 1900 censuses, maybe even the later 1800 censuses, it asks if you own the land or rent it.
Okay.
So if you rented it, I think you would have to kind of be creative to figure out who owned it. Maybe you would look up the nearest neighbor who owned land and look up his deeds.
Okay.
And but in the early days, most farmers owned their land. Thank goodness to the federal government, who made the land available at $1.25 an acre.
Nice.
And 40 acres at a time. If you ask farmers today, could they raise a family on 40 acres? They might say absolutely not. But our ancestors did it.
Yeah.
I watch a YouTube channel called Cole the Corn Star, and his family farms 1,700 acres of corn in order to provide for their family. And their family is 3 separate families, but it's a whole different ball game today over what it was when my grandpas were homesteading.
Because when I went to my grandfather's grave in Nebraska, and there were different farms out there with family burials on the land, and so I'm trying to figure out who the other Whitties were, who were out there buried on the land.
Well, if you get a map and you mark out where your Whitties lived on the map, and then you go to the deeds and see where other Whitties lived and mark where they lived on the maps, then that'll kind of give you a visual picture of that.
Okay.
I did that with my Wade family in the early days in Illinois, in the days prior to the 1850 census, when children would be listed. But I wanted to know where the different families lived in relation to each other.
Oh, okay.
Now, is all of that, like I said earlier, this is not, in some cases, it does not lead directly at all to temple work, but it sure helps you know more about the family. And when you know more about the family, you can find out more about the family. When I was trying to find out Father of Hugh's, John's family, because he lived in the early 1800s, when in the West, where they didn't have birth certificates, it was really hard for me to prove which children were actually his children. And so I just researched everything. I looked in all the land records. I looked in all the church records. I looked in all the county records. I looked in all the court records. And I found some very interesting court records that had nothing to do with land, that had nothing to do with temple work, but that gave me information about the family. And so I kind of said it was like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, starting in the middle. and then gradually I would find pieces to enlarge it and to enlarge it and to enlarge it. And I never got to the edge, but I sure had a big picture before it was all over. Diane.
You probably already mentioned this. I'm sorry. My mom's here, so I've been in and out.
Okay.
But just sometimes you can solve problems, especially after they died, because oftentimes, well, maybe not often, but a lot of times they will sell the land after the person died, or somebody's going to sell it, and all the heirs have to be involved with it. And so you find out the heirs, and particularly of daughters and their married names. So it can be a problem solver. And another thing is also, if they're in the South and you're doing some slave research, sometimes you really want to look at the land records, because like my ex-husband's family, they named all the slaves in a particular land record.
That is a very, very important point that I had completely left out. So I'm very glad that you said those things. So that was one of the things I did with Hugh Michael's land records, is I checked to see when was the last time that he was selling land and who was getting his land, and even before the end, because he was parceling it out bit by bit to his different sons. In their sad case, they sent either 4 or 5 sons to the Civil War, and they all came home but died before they'd been home for very many years. And their 2 daughters died pretty young before they had families, and altogether 12 children, not very many of them lived to see their own children married. So following all of them out in their land records was very important. And one of the advantages of doing it online is you can print them. It's much easier to print that page than it would have been otherwise. At the courthouse, you have to take it to the clerk of the court or to whoever's working there, and they have to stop and print them for you on the copy machine, and you have to pay for every page. And sometimes they're in good spirits and occasionally they're not. So, okay. Any more comments about, yes, Diane?
Hey, this isn't about land, but I don't want to forget, and I don't want Elsie to leave yet. Tomorrow, Elsie, you just need to know that John is also going to be there at noon to help somebody with the scanner. And so that might be helpful to you too, because then you can learn how to use the scanner as John's teaching this other person. Okay.
And this is the high-speed photo scanner.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you and, what's her name? Come.
And
Augustina. You're muted, Elsie. I can't.
And Elsie, we're glad to have you back.
Yeah.
We're glad that COVID is over enough that you're out and about and can be there for us.
You're muted. I can't hear you.
And
know how to unmute, to push that little button to unmute.
He's muted.
We can't.
now,
We can't
Elsie, your microphone's bad or turned off or something. We sure wish we could hear you.
But John will be there tomorrow at noon.
Okay.
Nancy, that was an excellent, the parts that when I was in and out, I love that. Thank you so much for teaching this. This is wonderful.
You bet. You bet. I'm going to look at our list of participants to see who I should ask to say the prayer. Does anybody want to volunteer? I would ask Elsie if her microphone was working. And if we were there, Elsie would try to help you figure it out. Diane Okermenko, would you please? Oh, I have one other non-related announcement. My husband loves the number 7. So on Wednesday night, he will be turning 77 years, 7 months, 7 days old. So we're having a party at 7 o'clock across the street from us in our daughter's backyard.
That's Wednesday, right?
So
Wednesday
any
night?
of you that can come and have birthday cake and ice cream and homemade root beer with us, would love to have you come.
That's Wednesday, right?
Wednesday. And so we live at 370 South, 3rd West, and Lily lives across the street at 353 South, 3rd West.
Next week is conference. We're not doing class next week, right? Or what do you think? We haven't discussed this.
I would think not, but Diane, that's up to you. And I think I will be in Colorado at a funeral.
Okay, let's say no. Let's say no next week.
Is everybody okay with no?
Okay.
If you're okay with it with no, shake your head yes. Okay. All right. So now we'll have the closing prayer. Thanks,